What happened to Bobby Moore's two children, Roberta and Dean? Both grew up in the shadow of a football legend, but their paths in life couldn't have been more different. Today, we're diving into the lives of Bobby Moore's children. Roberta, who carved out a successful career in art and philanthropy, and Dean, whose journey was tragically marred by personal struggles. Stick around to discover where they are now and how their father's legacy continues to shape their lives. Number 2. Roberta Moore. Bobby's elder child and only daughter stepped out of her father's shadow by carving a unique identity for herself. Rather than pursuing the limelight of football, she gravitated to the art and business world. In fact, Roberta's career began with a nod to her sports heritage. She worked at Panini, the famous football sticker company, in the marketing department. It's almost poetic. The little girl who once saw her dad's face on collectible cards grew up to help market those very stickers. This early career choice showed how Roberta embraced her connection to football while also making her own mark behind the scenes. Ambitious and driven, Roberta didn't stop there. She ventured into public relations and event management, even running her own company in New York City for a time. Her work brought her in contact with high-profile figures far outside the football world. She even organized events for former U.S. President Bill Clinton and members of the Kennedy family. Imagine that! The daughter of England's football captain coordinating galas for American presidents. Roberta had successfully built a network and career that was entirely her own. Those who know her describe her as energetic, creative, and very much her father's daughter when it comes to charm and grace under pressure. By 2007, Roberta's passion for art blossomed into a new venture. She founded Roberta Moore Contemporary, a gallery dedicated to showcasing cutting-edge contemporary artists. For over a decade, she ran pop-up art exhibitions across the UK and internationally, connecting artists with audiences in fresh, unexpected ways. In doing so, Roberta established herself as a respected art consultant and gallerist. This wasn't a celebrity vanity project. Colleagues note that she put in the hard work, curating shows and championing emerging talent. Her gallery garnered attention in the art community, proving that Roberta had successfully stepped into a spotlight of her own making, far from the shadow of the West Ham terraces. On the personal front, Roberta found happiness and stability. In 1995, she married Matthew Hobbes in a ceremony grand enough to make the society pages. St. Paul's Cathedral was the venue, no less. The wedding gathered her family, with Tina and brother Dean present, for a joyful occasion, a bright spot after the sorrow of losing Bobby just 2 years prior. In the years that followed, Roberta became a mother herself. She has 2 children, who by the late 2000s and 10s had grown into young adults. Friends say Roberta is a devoted mum, much as her own father was a devoted dad. She largely keeps her family life private, avoiding the tabloids and gossip. In public, she appears poised and positive, preferring to focus on charitable causes and community work rather than court any celebrity status. One cause especially close to Roberta's heart is preserving Bobby Moore's legacy for future generations. In partnership with West Ham United, her dad's beloved club, she helped establish the Moore Family Foundation in 2014. As founder of the foundation, Roberta has spent the last decade providing life-changing opportunities to young people in East London and Essex, the same communities that cheered for Bobby decades ago. The Foundation's programs send mentors into schools to support kids who need a boost, emphasizing the values Bobby stood for: hard work, humility, respect, generosity, and self-discipline. In 2016, the Foundation's initiatives won Community Project of the Year at the London Football Awards, a testament to its impact. Roberta often visits schools and events to speak to students, sharing stories of how her father rose from humble beginnings to World Cup glory. It's her way of keeping his spirit alive and using the Moore name to inspire and do good. In interviews, Roberta has expressed pride that her father's legacy continues to touch lives. Standing in the National Portrait Gallery in 2018, surrounded by photos of Bobby Moore, she said seeing his images honored in such a way made her incredibly proud that his legacy lives. It's clear that Roberta's journey has been about honoring her dad, not by living in the past, but by building something meaningful in the present. From football stickers to fine art, from Clinton-era fundraisers to East London youth projects, Roberta Moore's life has been rich and fulfilling. She successfully balanced being the daughter of a legend with being her own woman. But while Roberta was thriving in her endeavors, her younger brother's story was taking a much darker turn. Number 1. Dean Moore. Where Roberta found direction in business and art, Dean seemed to struggle under the weight of his family name and personal challenges. As a boy, Dean adored his father and loved football, but he did not end up following in Bobby's footsteps on the pitch. Those close to the family say that Dean was more reserved and shy compared to his outgoing sister. After his father's death, Dean was only in his mid-20s and appeared a bit lost. He hadn't settled on a clear career path by then. While he dabbled in various jobs, he eventually found work in the catering trade, a humble, honest living far from the glamour of professional sport. Former colleagues recall him as a friendly, hard-working man, the kind who would quietly make sure everyone else was okay, perhaps inheriting Bobby's courteous nature. Despite his good heart, Dean fought some tough battles, particularly with his health and personal demons. He developed an addiction to alcohol that haunted him for many years. We can only speculate whether losing his dad so young played a part, but it's clear that Dean struggled to cope. He once even described himself, somewhat sadly, as a habitual drinker on an online profile. It was as if he knew he was trapped in a cycle, but felt powerless to fully break free. His family tried to support him. His mum, Tina, especially, stood by him through the ups and downs. But overcoming addiction is never easy. Dean experienced several setbacks, and at times his drinking led to serious health issues. He was diagnosed with diabetes, a condition that can be exacerbated by heavy drinking and poor lifestyle, and doctors warned him that he needed to change his habits or face dire consequences. In his late 30s and early 40s, Dean made valiant attempts to turn his life around. He entered rehabilitation programs more than once, determined to beat his alcohol dependency. In fact, not long before his death, Dean celebrated completing a 5-month rehab stint, proudly writing that he had been sober for many months. "It's hard to keep up the good work," he admitted candidly on Facebook, acknowledging the daily challenge of staying clean. Friends recall that in the months before the end, Dean seemed hopeful and was trying his best. He had been dry, sober, for about 10 months and was looking healthier. It seemed like he might finally be gaining the upper hand over his addiction. Dean also had bright spots in his personal life. In the early 1990s, he became a father to a little girl named Poppy. Being a dad gave him a new sense of purpose. He adored his daughter, and those close to him say that despite his struggles, he was a loving father. Poppy was just an infant when her famous grandfather Bobby passed away, but as she grew, she learned about him through family stories and her Aunt Roberta's memories. For Dean, raising Poppy may have been a reminder of his own happy childhood moments before life grew complicated. He often told friends that Poppy was the best thing that ever happened to him. By 2011, Poppy was 19 years old, the same age Dean had been when England's World Cup hero died. The family couldn't help but notice a poignant symmetry in their stories. On July 28, 2011, tragedy struck the Moore family again. Dean Moore was found unresponsive in his West London flat, and despite paramedics' efforts, he was pronounced dead at the age of 43. News of his death shocked those who knew him and made headlines in Britain. It was the latest tragedy to befall the Moore family. One newspaper noted somberly, coming years after the loss of Bobby in 1993. For Tina and Roberta, it was unimaginably painful. Tina had now lost both her ex-husband and her son far too early, and Roberta her only sibling. The cause of Dean's death was attributed to natural causes brought on by his medical conditions. In other words, complications from his diabetes, likely worsened by years of alcohol abuse, had taken a fatal toll. Police found no signs of foul play. It was a tragic early death from health issues, the kind of outcome everyone had feared for Dean, but hoped would never come. He had been living alone, which made the news even sadder, struggling quietly by himself in the end. The bright progress he had made staying sober unraveled, and within weeks of seeming on a better path, his life was cut short. Tributes poured in for Dean. Fans of Bobby Moore left condolence messages recognizing that 2 family members lived to no age at all, mourning alongside the Moores. But the most heartfelt words came from Dean's daughter, Poppy. Grieving the loss of her father, Poppy publicly called him the best man in my life. And in an emotional note, she addressed Dean directly. She wrote, "I know how you felt to lose your dad at such a young age," acknowledging the cruel parallel. Dean lost Bobby at 24, and now she had lost Dean at 19. Those words hit home for everyone who read them. It painted a poignant picture of a family that had experienced a double heartbreak across 2 generations. Poppy's tribute also showed the love and bond that remained between father and daughter, despite all the hardships. Dean Moore may have faced many demons, but to his little girl, he was a hero in his own way. At Dean's funeral, mourners remembered a gentle soul who struggled but loved deeply. Former West Ham teammates of Bobby's sent condolences, and West Ham United arranged for a quiet tribute at their museum, a reminder that the club hadn't forgotten the family of their legend. Tina Moore was devastated by her son's death. In an interview, she broke down describing how she had dreamt of Bobby the very night Dean died, finding comfort in the idea that perhaps her ex-husband and son were together watching over the family. It was a touching, if heart-wrenching, coda to the story of her only son. With Dean gone and Bobby long past, Roberta Moore found herself the last remaining torchbearer of their small family. It was an undoubtedly heavy burden. She had lost her father and brother, and she had her mother's grief to care for as well. But Roberta's response was in line with what she had done all her life: carry on with strength and purpose, in a way that would make her father proud. In the years after 2011, Roberta continued to expand her work in the arts and philanthropy, all while keeping Bobby and Dean's memory alive at home. She has said that she feels both men with her in spirit during major family moments. When West Ham United honours Bobby Moore on anniversaries of the 1966 World Cup, or on what would have been his birthday, Roberta is often there, sometimes quietly accompanied by her own children, paying tribute to the grandfather they never got to know well. Roberta also remains deeply involved with the Moore Family Foundation and other charitable projects. Just recently, in 2024, she made an emotional visit to a primary school in East London that held special significance to her dad. There, she helped recreate a famous 1973 photograph of Bobby Moore posing with 99 school children, this time standing among a new generation of 99 smiling kids. Roberta was beaming in the photos, wearing a look of pride and a touch of nostalgia. "The photo has always been one of my favorites," she said, explaining how much it meant to commemorate her father's legacy half a century later. At that event, she also spoke to the students about her dad's journey from humble beginnings to World Cup glory, inspiring them to dream big despite challenges. It's easy to imagine Bobby Moore himself would have smiled at that scene, his daughter stepping into his shoes in the very community that adored him, spreading messages of hope and perseverance,